How to leverage AI, the development lifecycle in the enterprise. This is something that I'm just going to say, like, no one's got this figured out yet. And like, you're coming here, you're thinking that I've got it figured out. I don't. I'm going to tell you things that I'm seeing working, things that I'm not seeing working, and take away from it what you can. What I'm going to cover today will be sort of where are we trying to go with all of this AI, agentic workflow, like what is the North Star that we're going to, and try and give you a framework of which to think about those sorts of things. And then we'll go through some good strategies and some bad strategies, and then we'll think about this holistically, thinking about the people, the process, and the technology. I know AI is a great technology, but it's so much more than just a single technology. And so we'll go into a few of those pieces and then figure out, like, all right, where do we go from here? I've got an idea of how to frame this, how to work through it. What are the next steps? And so I'm sure you've all seen cases where companies are blowing through their token budget in record time. Uber went through millions of dollars worth of tokens that they wanted to spend over the course of the entire year in just the beginning of this year. And so now they are putting in limits across their engineers, somewhere in the order of like $1,500 per month per engineer. Other companies are a little bit higher than that, some companies are a little bit lower than that, but that's sort of like the range of which we're seeing token spend per engineer. And then you've got folks like the creator of OpenClaw, who OpenAI hired, and within his first month at OpenAI burns through $1.3 million worth of tokens. That'd be nice. These sorts of numbers like evoke a real like physical reaction. Like, that is so much money. Like, what return on investment was there? Like, how can you justify spending that much money for the work that you're doing? And so what many folks have tried to do is break down this journey that we're going on into different phases. And so in this case, you know, when you're just starting out and figuring out the AI, how do I use it? You might start with some like code completion inside the IDE and sort of like, all right, maybe that's like level 1 in the maturity matrix. And then as you start getting a little bit more involved, you start getting this more integrated into the IDE. Maybe you start using things like Kiro, which gives you spec-driven development and a really nice workflow for going through all of those sorts of things. But that's still very much a human that is making the call of like what to do, what to push through, all those sorts of things. Going back a little bit more, you start using some integrated AI systems where when you submit a pull request, maybe your AI is actually doing the first round of code review. And then you get to the final stage, which is agentic orchestration, where you delegate tasks to the AI. You explain what the intent is, here's what I want to go and do, and then the AI goes off and does all of these things. I see some people taking photo of this. This is arbitrary. This doesn't give you a framework about how to think about these things. Everyone has one form of matrix that is broken into maybe 3 phases. Why isn't it 5 phases? Maybe it's 10 phases. It doesn't really give you a framework about how to think about like what is the journey that we're going on. And so the way I like to think about it is like, oh, where's the North Star? Where are we trying to head towards? And what we're really looking at doing is moving things from the human to the AI. The first thing that we want to move is who holds the context. All of the things that need to happen for the AI to have a good understanding of what the task is. How do we move that more towards the AI from out of the human's head? And on the second axis, we have who is making the call of what to do next. Is it the human that is saying, oh, like, let's go and do this? Or is it the AI that has enough autonomy and authority to make a call over what to do next? And so we're really going from like no AI through to agentic orchestration, that delegation phase. Now you can break this up into as many levels and frameworks and pieces as you want. There's sort of no right or wrong way of thinking about this, but like this as a framework gives me a really clear way of saying, all right, I have given the AI a whole bunch of context, but I'm still making the call about every single step that it needs to do next. Well, I'm not doing this in a balanced way in that case. Like if it's got the context, give it a little bit more autonomy and see where that goes. If you end up giving the AI full autonomy and not the context, it's going to hallucinate, it's going to do a whole bunch of things randomly, it's going to anticipate all of your needs and solve the world's problems, but not really your problem. You want to do this in a really nice, balanced way. And so how do we get there? Like, what is the strategy in order to roll this out, particularly when you're working at a large enterprise company? Well, I can tell you what not to do. Don't just roll out a new tool to your thousands of employees and have a top-down mandate saying you must implement 2 agents by the end of the month or you're fired. Like, I've seen that strategy. I'm sure you've all seen that strategy play out in one way or another. This is not a winning strategy. A better way of thinking about this is being holistic. I haven't invented the terms people, process, and technology. These are very old ways of breaking down problems. This is the holistic approach that you want to take and roll it out in waves. Enterprises are made up of people. People take a long time to change and evolve and adapt the way they're working. And so you really want to break this down into multiple pieces that you're rolling out over the course of time. And think about it not from purely a technology solution. I'm going to roll out this tool. Everyone's automatically going to know how to use it. Think about how am I going to be changing my processes and how am I going to be changing the people. And so let's dive into some of those. The title of this talk is What Works and What Doesn't. And so some of the things that don't work. Doing a reduction in force and getting rid of a large percentage of your work base in anticipation of the AI gains, please don't do that. That's not a winning strategy. I'm sure many of you have worked at companies that have had that type of strategy. That is not the way. Yes, we do want to have some sort of level of disruption, but there are much more positive ways of doing that. And I'm seeing many stories of leaders at these companies making these cuts in order to create the disruption. We'll see how well that plays out. That wouldn't be my choice. And if you look across the wide range of people that you've got working at your company, not everyone is going to be an AI expert already. So rolling this out, rolling a new tool out without any training is also not a very good strategy. You want to be able to take people through the journey that needs to be gone through, and I'll go into some of the details about that. And then the other thing that I'll say is while AI is really interesting as a technology, if you only focus on rolling out this to your engineering team and ignore product and where all of the information that is coming that decides how to go and build your product, you're really missing out. And so what should you do then? Dr. Werner Vogels at the reInvent conference last year gave a fantastic keynote. It's only an hour. I very much recommend that you go and watch this. One of the things that he opens up his presentation with is, will AI take my job? And he's like, maybe. Will AI make you obsolete? No, if you evolve. And so while what you're doing today or what you were doing yesterday may not be the thing that is necessary today because of what AI is capable of doing and where it is going, your job and everyone around you's job will evolve. And humans are really good at adapting. We have people living in Alaska. That wouldn't be my choice, but we evolve, we adapt. And so the fear that happens with people thinking if my job is at stake and something is going to be taken away, that's a very real fear. And as an engineering leader at a enterprise, you want to dispel that fear because it's just going to create a bunch of negative motivation within your company, and that narrative can spread much, much faster than you want it to. And so if you frame it as an evolution and we're going to take everyone along the journey, you'll have much better success. Training and enablement is a very crucial piece of rolling out changing your development lifecycle across the company. And recognizing that some people will be at the beginning of their journey of learning how to use AI, and you want to make Claude Code 101 training available to them, fantastic, like go and do that. If someone's already using maybe that level 3 in that made up matrix that I had, how do you get them from level 3 to level 4? What training is going to help them along the way? And so use a learning management system. Many companies already have one. Skilljar is a fantastic one if you don't have one already. But use some sort of learning management system where you can put up new courses and pull from all of the content that's already available and structure it in a way so that your team and your surrounding teams can go through that journey and learn how to move themselves from one level to the next level, however you define that. And in some companies, not everyone is intrinsically motivated. You may want some external validation, and so you can create a badging system or a competition board or a leaderboard. Like, some people are motivated by those sorts of things, and so make them available for the ones that want to use that and like climb aboard and see like how I'm making progress throughout that process. And recognize that you want to build a community around this change that you're making. And so there will be some people at your company that are experts. So let them have office hours and let other people come into their office hours and ask them questions and figure out how to do things. You'll have people at the beginning of their journey. And so you want to be able to create a really nice, lightweight show and tell where it's like, oh, I just figured out how to do this thing in AI. Like, let me spend 5 minutes and like share that with the team. And so you've got the experts and the novices both having the ability to share what they're learning. And it really builds like this positive momentum within the company about rolling out and evolving this process. And then myself as an engineer, I've always known that there's tension between product and engineering. This isn't going away, but this cycle that we have needs to very much change. Product is used to writing PRDs or product requirements documents that have very little context in them because it's already in the minds of the engineers. If you're trying to get all the way to agentic orchestration, that AI has none of that context. And so every time you go through one of these loops and the AI is producing bad results or like not going the way that you want it to, think back earlier in the process. Like, what could we have changed about the product development that would have informed the AI to create better results? And that will take multiple cycles for your company to evolve and adapt. All right, that's covered the people side of things. Let's go and talk about the process side. Working in greenfield environments is beautiful. That is not the reality that we live in an enterprise world. We've got these large legacy code bases, and all of those wonderful AI demos that you've seen, they work really well because they don't have to deal with all of the context and complexity that you have in these existing environments. And so going and treating a brownfield environment like a greenfield is not a winning strategy. Anytime that you see AI slop come into your process, that is a big red flag to say, what caused that? How do I go back upstream and figure out how to prevent that? Accepting it as just like, oh, well, that's how AI works, is going to land in your code base and then spread because the AI is going to think like, oh, that's how you want me to do things. So anytime you see AI slop, figure out a way to remove that. And then measuring, like, this is going to burn tokens. There's no doubt about it. Pushing forward, if you're not seeing the returns on investment, means that you need to be measuring, like, how am I seeing the returns on investment? And if you keep pushing forward without seeing those returns, you're just going to end up spending $1.3 million in the first month and not really having anything to show for it. And so what are some tools that we can use that help? AI loves to be enthusiastic and anticipate all of your needs and go and solve all of your problems. Giving it some constraints is a really nice way of getting it to do just what you want it to. And so test-driven development, again, not a new topic. If you ask the AI, go and write the tests and have the tests fail before going and implementing what I want you to do, It's a really nice way of constraining the AI because now it doesn't have the ability to be enthusiastic or less ability. It's going to implement the whatever it is that needs to pass that test and then say that it's complete. And pairing that with the spec-driven development approach lets you really break it down. When Kiro was first out, I created a game and went through like the beautiful spec-driven development flow that Kiro has. And at step number 15, it's like, I think I should add tests now. I'm like, but you were testing things the whole way through and I had to keep correcting you. Like, why didn't we do that at the beginning? And so I very much recommend like spec-driven development is great, but make sure like after you've got the scaffolding in place, set up the testing framework and then get into the implementation. In these large, complex brownfield environments, documenting what exists is going to be really important. Your code is the source of truth, but there will be, the further you get away from the codes, like maybe looking at the comments around that code or the specification that we use to go and generate that, like the PRD, as you get further and further away from the code, you're introducing more and more lies because things have evolved since all of those things were done. And so being able to document what that code is doing and putting in the context around that will help your AI say, all right, I need to implement a change. There is no AI today that can hold all of this in memory. And so how do I use progressive disclosure to figure out like, all right, this is the area of the code that I want to work within. And I'm going to split up and create an idea, like do some research within this code base to figure out like what it is that I need to go and change. And then after I've done all of that research, I write a little document and then I go and throw away the context window. Now I'm starting with the intent, the research, and now I'm going to go through and like figure out a plan. After I've got the plan in place, throw all of that away. All right, here's the intent, here's the research, here's the plan, smaller amount of context. Now go and do the implementation. And so documenting how all of your different pieces work and doing that in a tree-like structure gives the AI the ability to just pull in the pieces that are necessary and then you either use sub-agents or new context windows to keep within the context window boundary what it is that is important. And then measuring ROI is, if it's not important yet, it will be when your CFO comes to you and says like, why are we spending so much? What do we have to show for this? And so this isn't measuring lines of code. This isn't this is far more than DORA and space metrics that many companies have rolled out. This is more about how much of the code that is generated is accepted within the code base, and then tracking that like 2 weeks later, does that code get reworked? If that code is getting reworked, pretty good chance that what was generated and accepted initially turns out to not be what was required. You could classify that as a little bit of slop and go and clean that up. And so your measurement system needs to be a little bit more complex than what we've done in the past. And I have not, like walking through this expo hall, I haven't seen anyone really solve this problem. So if you want a startup idea, go figure this out and solve it. All right, we've covered people, process, technology. You don't need to use the most expensive model for everything. There are many other models. And as of yesterday, we've now got another more expensive model to use. You don't have to use that for everything. Use the less capable models where you can because it's a lot more token efficient. The ability for an AI to produce code and like our ability as engineers to produce code is so much faster than it's ever been in the past. And that becomes a choke point for your CI/CD pipeline, for your security team, for like all of the review that needs to happen. And so this isn't a sort of case where we can just skip all of that and do that later. That really needs to be thought of now because it's going to be the choke point. If you get to full agentic orchestration, all of those things will be choke points. And then similarly to when you're cooking in the kitchen, you don't start with a messy kitchen, like clean it up first, get your ingredients out. Same deal in a brownfield environment, like get all of the things in place. Don't take on a huge, massive project from the beginning and expect to have good results. Prepare the environment for agentic orchestration. And so comes to thinking about like, all right, what are we going to do? What are we going to put in place here? Context engineering, the tooling that's around, the guardrails, all of those need to be figured out. Local execution versus remote execution for agentic workflows are quite different environments. And so thinking about how to properly structure the work that needs to happen, is that better to have as something that an engineer can run on their own laptop? If so, how do I version that? How do I distribute that? When one engineer wants to write something and make some changes, how does the person next to me go in and use that? You're probably going to need some sort of agent registry or something where you can share pieces of this. And the number of inconsistencies across all of the different AI tools make this incredibly painful. And so taking a little bit of time to figure out the tooling and make a call on like which tooling is going to be the right one for you, it needs some research, and you need to spend a bit of time figuring that out. Everything that we do around AI is really context management. And so getting really, really good at it and understanding it is crucial to having success here. That's why progressive disclosure is so important, so that you can have one like index document that says, all right, I need to go a little bit deeper and manage the context window. Once that context window goes maybe above like 40%, 60%, it starts getting into this dumb zone and you start getting really, really bad results. And so there are many tools that I would encourage you to get familiar with that help you manage that context window. And so starting a new session, using sub-agents to do things in parallel, like each one of these gives you a new context window and the ability to sometimes start fresh. Sometimes you want to pull in a little bit of content into that new area. But getting really good at like how to do context management will give you much, much better results. And then teach the people around you. This is not an intuitive thing. And it helps you really get into that sort of flow state when you're able to like really properly manage that and like have multiple things working in the background. It can be a really powerful tool. And as I was saying before, on the guardrails side, having security review in place is incredibly important. Our ability to produce code and therefore a larger attack surface means that you're going to have a lot more vulnerabilities in your code base. And so one of the things that I would recommend that you go and do is build a vulnerability remediation system that is taking a look at like all of these changes that are happening, upgrading dependencies, looking at CVEs, patching these sorts of things. Like this is not a guardrail to add on later because it's going to explode, and that has to be done holistically, like has to be done as part of the entire process. All right, so that's people, process, technology. We've covered all of those things. So what's next? What are the first agentic workflows that I would recommend building? And so coming back to that test-driven development idea, like we've got these 100 or so or more repositories at your enterprise. How many of those have great test coverage? How many of them have no test coverage? Create a reusable testing excellence work pack or workflow or whatever you want to call it that you can throw at any one of these repositories and get it ready for agentic development. Have it go through and figure out like, all right, like this is a Java code base. It's using JUnit 5 but isn't particularly good coverage. Let me go and add tests in these places. And yes, like you want to have a human review this. So like as part of that workflow, write the tests that you're going to produce into Jira, have a human review it, put in acceptance criteria, and then have them implement the tests and then go and verify it. That is a really nice like workflow that is reusable across large parts of your code base. And maybe you do it for Java first, and then you add the Python one, and like whatever it is at your enterprise, like you add in these workflows. The vulnerability remediation one I already talked about. Tech debt. AI loves to copy what's already there. And so if your code base already is full of tech debt, guess what's going to be amplified? A lot more tech debt. And so have an agent go through and just like look at the to-dos, find common code smells. There are a ton of ways of seeing like what the tech debt is, and then create plans to go and remediate a whole bunch of these things, because if you leave them in there, they're only going to amplify. And then one agentic workflow that I thought was really, really interesting that would have been human not really capable is every time a PR goes to production, this agentic workflow went through and said, all right, here is the code that has changed. Let me go and create custom monitors in Datadog or whatever your tool is to look for all of the areas of this code base that are changed. Like, I'm building custom monitors for that. And you'll have to build a lifecycle around this. Like, you don't want them to live forever. Like, as you deploy that out and you see it starting to get production access or production usage, those monitors, that would have been very, very painful for a human to go and create each one of those. So it's looking at like, oh, this log line threw an error. Was that one of the ones that I just changed? If so, it was really easy to tell what part of the code base caused that issue, and then you can remediate from there. And so another really, really cool agentic workflow to build first. And so hopefully this has been really helpful, give you a really nice way of thinking about this, but it can't come from the top down about how to roll out DLC. It has to be a grassroots movement. And so you want to be working incrementally, building this up over time, and really advocating for like what you know is going to be helpful getting to this agentic workflow, not just sort of taking the top down of like, here's what this looks like. And if you need any help with any of this, I work for Kalent. We have done over 200 of these AI engagements, from implementations to this. Like, we're happy to help, as so as many of the other places here. So don't feel like you have to do this alone. Thank you.